Hey guys, I'm going to be doing the next chapter of our read aloud. And if you remember what happened in our last chapter, Dune has kind of been targeted by, he's been targeted by a lot of people, but recently he's been targeted by people of Sparks because they accused him a lot of things that didn't happen, at least I don't think happened. I think that we agreed together they didn't happen. And so we're back in Dune's perspective. I know we were in Lena's before, but now we're back in Dune's. So our chapter is chapter 21. It's called Counterattacks and Attacks. So, I'm already getting nervous. So I'm just going to start. I might pause here and there to kind of reflect or ask you a question, so just know that. The morning after the trouble of the fountain, Dune awoke to the clamor rising through the window from the front of the hotel. He looked out, but he could only see the tops of people's heads, all clustered around the front steps. He ran downstairs with his shirt still unbuttoned, flapping around him, to see what was happening. The doors of the hotel stood open. Through them, he saw the heaps of trash that had been dumped on the front steps. He went closer and got a better look. The piles seemed to be consisted of rotten vegetables and filthy rags scattered all over with shiny green leaves and sharp twigs and long creepers pulled up by their dirty roots. Dune stared at it with the same sick feeling he had when he saw the black words on the hotel wall. If you remember, they had horrible, get out, things like that. A second, I stopped where I was. It wasn't so much the pile itself that made him feel sick. It was that whoever did this hated the people of Ember, and hated Dune in particular. This was an act of true revenge. He went outside, edging around the pile. Claire was standing on the step just below it, peering down at the leaves and branches. Why would they bother to scatter leaves on everything, she asked. And why? And they're all the same kind, too. She picked up a sprig and looked closely at the bright green leaves, rubbing them between her fingers and sniffing them. Strange, she said. But most people were too upset to pay attention to the contents in the pile. An angry buzz filled the air, and now and then one voice or another rose above the rest. This is an outrage! It was clear, sharp voice. Tick's voice, Dune was sure. Then a high voice. I hate them! I hate them! That must have been Lizzie, and sure enough, there she was, standing next to Tick, dunking her shoes in a bucket of water and getting the dirt stains off. After a while, Tick climbed the steps and clapped his hands. All right, everyone, he said. We've been attacked again, and this is worse than the first time. It's a disgusting insult, and it fills us with rage and anger. But all we can do right now is get this mess off of our doorstep. Let's get busy and clean. Everyone did. They picked up armloads of the leafy vines and carried them away. They shoved the garbage down the ground and kicked it into the bushes. They brought buckets of water up from the river and sloshed them over the steps until everything and everyone was a lot more clean. Tick supervised this all, calling out directions, though he didn't do any actual work himself, Dune noticed. He doesn't want to get his clothes dirty, thought Dune rather grumpily. When the cleanup was done, people stood around and argued. Some were marching down to the town that very minute, confronting the town leaders and demanding that the vandals be punished. Other people said no, it wasn't good to cause trouble. It would just make everything more unpleasant and worse. And anyway, it wasn't the whole village that was against them, only some of them. But which ones, someone yelled, and how do we stop them? They have to be stopped. They have to be stopped. I'm tired of being blamed and punished, cried someone else. I'm tired of being starved. And what about winter, someone else yelled. The word had spread, and people had added this to their list of grievances. Are we just going to sit here and take this treatment? No, 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 people screamed. Dune could see Tick moving through the crowd, bending to speak into the ears of one person then another. As people listened, their eyes narrowed and their lips tightened, and they turned to Tick and nodded. The shouting died down after a while because people couldn't agree on a course of action. If they didn't go to work, they wouldn't get any lunch. So most of them went back to their ordinary routines. They washed their hands and faces in the river. They ate what remained in their parcels for breakfast, and they headed up the road towards the village. Dune and his father went too, though Dune went rather reluctantly, which means he didn't really want to go. He's kind of dragging along. "Father," he said, "this is the third time they've attacked us. Don't you think that we have to do something?" "What do you propose we do?" his father said. "I don't know," said Dune, "but we have to do something. We can't just let ourselves be trampled, can we?" "Son," said Dune's father, "I don't know the answer, but we're in a tough situation here." He clasped his hands behind his back and walked for a while, looking down at the road. "It doesn't seem that something is called for," he said finally. "The trouble is that violence just leads to more violence, so I just don't know the answer." Dune's team was assigned to the cornfield that day. He and his father spent hours on their knees, yanking prickly weeds out of the ground. Dune's arms itched bad. He kept having to stop and scratch it. Was it mosquitoes biting him? He scratched and scratched again. It felt like 50 mosquito bites, not just one. He had them on his arms, too. Both arms itched like crazy. Finally, he stopped working and held his arms out in front of him. From wrist to elbow, they were carpeted with red lumps. "Look, Father," he cried, "I have a rash. What is it?" "I don't know, son," his father said, "but I have it too." The itchy rash spread from his arms and hands all the way up to his face, of all the Emberites who had been helping with the cleanup that morning. "What is this?" people asked as they worked in the bakery, in the bike shop, the brickyard, and the tomato fields. They itched, they scratched, and the rash spread and oozed and itched still some more. The villagers knew what it was. "Poison oak," they said. "It's kind of like poison ivy." Ooh, this is not good. "How you only had to touch it to get a rash. You may have been scrambling around in the woods," they said. But the Emberites had not been scrambling around in the woods. They knew that they had been poisoned from the vines in front of the hotel. Someone had done this to them on purpose. Fury spread among the Emberites like fire. I'm going to say that one more time and you're going to figure out what type of figurative language that is. Fury spread among them like fire. So if you said a simile, nice job, because I like. Those who heard about the poison oak raged about it to those who hadn't, and before long everyone knew. Diggers threw down their shovels. Fruit pickers pushed the ladders onto the ground and stalked out of the orchard. Someone in the bakery flung a great clump of dough at the supervisor, and someone in the egg shop hurled 3 eggs at the wall. The terrible itching aggravated everyone's anger, and before long the people of Ember began to gather in the streets and in the plaza. And the gathering became a crowd, and the crowd became a mob. Dune ran into the village with the other field workers, and he found himself in the middle of a mob. He heard Tick's voice from somewhere nearby. "They gave us poison. What shall we give them?" Uh-oh. When there was no response,